Ladies and gentlemen, I still exist. This is Callie Sioux, author and creator of 1232, an audio epic, and the host of the Never Drop Your Sword podcast. Now, it has been a very long time since we've been able to release any kind of episodes, whether that has been an interview or, of course, 1232. Now, there's a couple of things I can't wait to update you guys on, but today I'm interviewing Hannah Carter, an author from 20 Hills Publishing, about her book Saltwater Souls, so stay tuned for that. But a fun update on 1232 Season 1. We are nominated, y'all. We have received a nomination for Best Audio Drama from Realmmaker Awards, and that is happening in July. We are so grateful to our sponsors, to our listeners. Please like, share, and rate the show. It helps spread it. It helps us get closer to Season 2. And Season 2, where, when, how is it? Those are good questions. I hope to answer that later this fall. But for now, please enjoy this interview. And just to let you know, I apologize for the audio quality and the video quality if you end up finding this on YouTube or through the podcast. I know that we try to hold ourselves to excellence, but I do a lot of remote interviews, and I often have to be in strange places interviewing folks who are also in strange places. And so I hope that you can still get through this episode and enjoy it, despite a little bit of audio interference. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Never Drop Your Sword podcast, where I get to talk to the creatively courageous, from authors and painters and musicians and seamstresses to anyone who is pursuing their arts with a lot of courage. And authors are not short on that, as these days it takes a lot to put out their art, to do self-publishing or publish with a publisher. There's so many pieces that a lot of people don't know about. So today I'm talking to Hannah Carter, and I'm talking about her Saltwater Souls collection of short stories, which, if you haven't picked up from the title, do include mermaids, the sea, and pirates. So, Hannah, welcome to Never Drop Your Sword. We're excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. We're going to talk about all kinds of things, and perhaps we're going to go into some mermaid folklore and some cryptology and various other things. But before we get into that, Hannah, tell my audience who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Hannah Carter, and I always say that I like to write stories that have mermaids, magic, and a little splash of murder. Um, so I like to write hope-filled stories, which doesn't mean that my stories won't get dark. It just means that I'm going to lead you through the darkness and let you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Because one of the main things that compels me to write is my desire to make sure that readers feel like they are never alone. So that's really where my heart is in all of these stories, and what you can find in all of my short stories and my novels. I love to tackle the hard, sometimes controversial like subjects, but always with the mindset of letting people know that no matter what they're going through, they're not the only ones that go through it. And if I like to use a fantasy backdrop in it, yeah, people in every world can deal with similar issues that we go through.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Now, and you have also written quite a few other things. I mean, like you said, we're going to talk specifically about Saltwater Souls today, a more mermaid themed short story collection that you publish with 20 Hills. And then you also have your Atlantis Trilogy. You also have you're pretty prolific when it comes to short stories, let me tell you. I have not been able to keep up with all of your flash fiction with Havoc Publishing and various others. And then you have won some awards as well. So, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of my information, but A Home for Nova won a Realm Award in 2022. Yes. House of Shadows was a finalist in 2024, just last year. And then your short story, Laura, won a Reedsy Award also.
Yes. Yeah, your information is spot on.
Okay, good. Yeah. And you've also done some devotional work, which we may or may not touch into, but finding God in anime. And so there's some really awesome things that you have already accomplished, Hannah. And that takes a lot of courage, because it's not easy being an artist in today's world. So tell me about, I already kind of know how all authors begin. It typically starts pretty darn young, And we all are given this certain type of desire, I believe, from the Lord that infuses us with the passion to tell a good story. And I love that you mentioned that you fill your stories with hope, as do I, because I find that so absolutely essential. Things can get dark, like you said. There can be murder, there can be fantasy, there can be evil times. But if there is no hope, then there's literally no point. What really, go ahead and get deeper into you as a person, why hope is so important.
So I think hope is so important to me for two reasons. The first reason is because I'm also a Christian. And so I believe that hope is really, it encompasses the entire gospel, because this, like, our faith is the hope for what we do not see yet. So if we don't have the hope that, like, what we believe is real and that God is real, then honestly, what do we like? Why are we Christians? Why do we call ourselves Christians? And so I think even that's a huge aspect of it for me. I also think just in regular life, I always like, I like to say, if you take God out of it, that doesn't mean, like, you should still have hope in it. And I don't mean that like without God you
Yeah,
that
it's
can
not.
sound a little, yeah, yeah. But I just mean, like, in everything you have to have hope. Like, God is the source of our hope as Christians, but in anything that you do, if you don't have hope, for me, it makes me question why I'm even doing it. So when I start out on a book, if I don't have hope that I'm going to finish it, then why am I doing it? What is it that drives me? Or if I don't have hope that I can take a bad situation and make it a good situation, what is encouraging me to move? So I just think hope is so, it is so powerful that it can propel us through anything. And without hope, at least for me, like I said, I it takes away the motivation to do anything. And that can lead to some pretty dark places if you don't have the hope that, like, things will get better, or that you can accomplish things, or that death is not the end, or that God is real.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. Um, is there such thing as false hope?
I do believe that there I personally believe that there is false hope as well.
Okay.
I think that sometimes we can also delude ourselves. And I struggle a lot with negativity at sometimes, which is
Sure.
why hope is so important to me, because my default necessarily isn't to be hopeful. It's to be like, all right, well, let's look at how all these things could go wrong. Let's, like, be realist about it.
Mhm,
There's a
mhm,
quote from Avatar: The Last Airbender where Sokka and Katara are talking,
mhm.
and Katara, of course, is full of optimism, and she's like, everything's gonna be fine. And then Sokka, like, challenges her on that, and she's like, "Are you calling me a liar?" And he's like, "No, I'm saying you're an optimist." So same thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's interesting because especially in the arts and in entertainment, which is what we, focus on this podcast, is that, there's can be a lot of false hope and
Yes.
silly optimism. And,
Hmm.
it's important to have courage and belief and conviction in your art. However, there are false promises that can be
Yes.
made that you can put your hope in. Like, oh,
Definitely.
well, I can become a New York Times bestseller. You can't if you have a lot of money to buy everyone off. Could it
Yeah.
happen?
Hmm.
Absolutely. But the system itself is not operating off of hope and merit. It's operating out of a different system that we could maybe
Is.
talk about later. But I don't know if you've recognized that, where is while it's important to not give into that negativity. And like you said earlier, you said, I've got to have hope that I'm going to finish this story or push myself to do that because like I can do it. I
Mhm.
can finish it. I have to believe in myself as an author and in my vision. But at the same time, there's that realism that
Yeah.
has to take into play. And then a lot of hard work begins. Do you think that your journey as an author or other authors you have observed recognize the amount of work and effort that goes into it? Are there moments where you feel like, man, you are in a fight, you're in a battle, just within your art, let alone dealing in your head those confidences versus the negativity versus the imposter syndrome, all those things? How do you work through that in your writing?
So I'll let you know when I do. Yeah.
When you find the secret, could you let us know?
Yes, exactly. Once the secret of the universe is revealed to me, I'll make sure to let everybody else know.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question because I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome and like just believing that like my works aren't good enough or that there's always like there's always someone better than me, which is like we were saying, that's going to be true. We don't
Right.
have false hope that we are the pinnacle of all success. But I think what can really get into authors' heads is, or any creative, honestly, because I've seen this in the art community. I've seen this, I'm sure it's everywhere. I've seen this in the professional community, just everywhere. But we always get it into our heads, I think, that unless we're absolutely the best, then there's no point in even doing it. So the second that someone comes along and we're like, oh, they've got it all together. They're so great. They're doing this and that, and that's everything I've ever wanted to be. Then I feel like it discourages us because we tend to see things almost in black and white. Like we don't realize that the truth is in the gray a lot of the times. And so it's like, okay, somebody might be better than you. So what? That doesn't mean that are telling the same story as you. That doesn't mean that they have the same life experiences of you. I think that would almost like demonstrate, false hope and hope, because you're like, I can hope that my story will be the best thing that I can write and that it will impact the people that I am supposed to impact. And not the false hope of I'm going to be the best of the best, and like you said, the top of the New York Times, and everybody is going to love my books, and I'll start a worldwide craze and have a movie deal and everything. Like
Yeah.
we have to have that realism, and it's okay to have those pipe dreams. Like I'd love for this to happen, but I think where hope and false hope, kind of the boundary between them, is kind of when you pin everything like your self-worth or like, and that leads back into your imposter syndrome. But like I think the false hope comes when you pin your entire identity on, I have to get this, I have to do this, I have to achieve this, or else all of this is worthless. And that is what we have to fight against. And like the only way that I know to combat like imposter syndrome or just like the negativity, the hopelessness of like, why am I doing this? Because it's clearly not for the money, clearly not for the reviews, clearly not
Right.
because I think I'm going to be the next like Hunger Games craze or whatever. You have to come back to the hope of, I'm doing it because I believe that what I have to say is important. I believe that I love it. I'm doing it for the passion. I believe that I'm doing it because I'm called to create, that I have a story to tell, that I want to help somebody, like whatever, insert your realistic hope here.
Mm.
And then that is the one thing that you have to fall back on and be like, yeah, this is why I do it, even if all of this doesn't come with that. And it doesn't matter if Joe Blow over here gets it. Good for him. Good for him. Great.
Yeah.
It'd be great if it happened for me too, but that doesn't have to be my path. There's a line in Hamilton that comes to mind in the song Wait for It. And we don't always like Aaron Burr. But I do like the line where he says, I am the one thing in life I can't control. Like I'm not falling behind. I'm not running late. I'm going to wait for it. And so we have to wait patiently, and we have to know that like we can't control all of this.
Okay.
We can't control how many people read our books. So we can't base our self-worth off of good reviews, never getting a bad review, doing all of this. We just have to base it on what we can control and our attitude and our hope.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's very well said, and it's a great way to kind of pin those two different things next to each other, the false hope and the real hope that we have. I have a question that, uh, you're very familiar with, and especially the Christian speculative world, and I am too. And now I've added a new layer to it. So people ask me, "You're a Christian, you own a bar and a music venue. Why is that possible?" And also, as an author, and you as an author, you get asked, I'm sure, well, why do you write fantasy? Why do you think it's okay to incorporate mermaids telling stories of hope or pirates when
Mhm.
those things are, maybe not biblically accurate, or you're leading people into a false reality, and it's not very Christian of you? So, you know, how do you deal with those people, specifically around your stories?
That's a great question. Um, I think that I would go back to the fact that Jesus also used parables. And not all of them were always 100% based in reality. Um, he used metaphors, he used allegories and everything. And I don't think that having an allegory dampens your message at all, because if we're supposed to like take if we're supposed to follow Jesus's example, then we can follow both God's example of being a creative right from the beginning of time, but also Jesus, where he's like, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say that this happened. Let's say that
Yeah.
this happened. Like, these are all hypotheticals. They're all like, they're maybe not situations based in reality, but Jesus is like, but I'm going to use this and I'm going to embed the message that I want to, but I'm going to give it to you in a digestible form that is appealing to you. Kind of how like we put medicine sometimes and you like put a coating around it to make it taste better or something, or to make kids like want to take it. I don't differentiate. And another layer of that is that if God has given me this interest, this like imagination to use, why should I not put it to use? Why should I not be like, what if there was a world and that this may happen? Because as far as I'm concerned, in every what if, there's always God has made that what if too. So, and I'm not saying that like every world exists, or but like I'm not ruling out everything, but I'm
Right.
also saying that like it doesn't matter what reality I write about, or like what exists, what doesn't exist. If it exists, then God is the creator of it. If I write about it, I am operating as if God has created this world and like these characters. And so it always goes back to him.
Mhm.
And it is my way of honoring him and using the imagination that he gave me.
Right.
And to bring in, because I have noticed that some people will have, in Christian circles, some people will have that argument where they're like, we shouldn't use like magic, we shouldn't use like all of these things, but a lot of them also love CS Lewis and CS Lewis's work, and I've never quite understood that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's always that, well, Disney magic is okay, or C.S. Lewis magic is okay,
Hmm.
but,
Hmm.
and Tolkien, of course, is
Oh
blameless.
yeah, never a
But yeah,
contestant.
no, never, never. But, Harry Potter, or even Hunger
Hmm.
Games, or, even situations where it's a very rough world, and things aren't really adhering to, um, God's creation, but there's a clear delineation between good and evil.
Hmm.
People will say, well, those aren't good, but this is okay. And,
Yeah.
I've had this kind of conversation a lot with people, and goes back to a lot about how you're taught in your church and family community, and then how
Hmm.
you grow as an individual. We are called to have an individual relationship with Christ, and it shouldn't be dependent on those factors. But those
Yeah.
factors play a huge role in how we see things, and like, my mom was a little bit like that in the early stages, where it was like, well, yeah, Narnia is okay, but Harry Potter's not, or whatever the situation may be.
Mhm.
But what she did simultaneously with watching what I was ingesting as a child, which I think is still important, especially when you're young,
Yeah,
is
definitely.
she was for sure to tell me, like, hey, this is all imaginary, and in those imaginations we can be honoring the Lord, or we can be looking for something that looking for something in someone that isn't him, basically, and that is
Yeah.
darker, and be drawn to those things. I was drawn to a lot of like Celtic paganism because I was so proud and excited about my Scottish and Irish heritage, and I loved stories, and I loved music, and I love creatures. I've always had just such a huge imagination, and I got really drawn into that and had to learn where the lines were, because while perhaps Narnia doesn't exist, which I think could be debatable, um, the spiritual realm truly does. And in that spiritual realm, there are things and various spirits that are good and bad for you. And
Mhm.
there are so many nuances and layers to whether we can say, oh, well, Harry Potter is real and magic is real, or it isn't, or miracles are real and they aren't, or this is how they work, or God is against magic. We have lost so much of the meaning of words, times, and places, and honestly lost a lot of touch gotten out of touch of,
Mhm.
as Christians, especially in the American church, the reality of the spirit world and the realms, and the reality of miraculous healing and a bit of that mysticism.
Mhm.
Things that God does and moves that we don't understand. And we always want to have an answer. We want to say, oh, well, it definitely happened this way. And it definitely happened this way. And like creation is real 100%, but there's no way a mermaid ever existed. And it's like, you could be right. Is this something I'm going to base my faith off of? No, but I'm going to have this conversation because there's some funky things out there, okay?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is it an evil spirit, or is it a real
Mhm.
thing? And we can talk about that later for sure. But I think that conversation is essential to where we're going to go with
Yes.
this and where we're going to go with Saltwater Souls. So we're going to go back to your book here, which, if anyone has forgotten, if you're listening, then you will know that I'm talking to Hannah Carter right now, and we're talking about her book, a collection of short stories. Now, you have quite a few different themes going on in Saltwater Souls. And this is going to lead, don't worry folks, it's going to lead back into, are mermaids real? Do we have cryptids? Are they in the Bible? What's going on? I definitely want to go there. But let's talk specifically about your work, and we'll frame some of our questions around your book specifically. So, perfect. Yeah, so let's talk about some of the short stories. Give our listeners a overview of some of the different characters you have throughout, and some fun themes. And then, if you want to, let's dive into some of the spiritual themes you have involved in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the story opens, and the first story in Saltwater Souls is the Lightkeeper. Or yes, the Lightkeeper. Sorry,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I had to look over it, and I was like, we changed
Is
the
it?
title on this one so many times. It was the Lightkeeper. I think she's gonna bring me a copy right now. That's perfect.
Oh, good. Yeah. Let's see the book. It's a beautiful cover
Yes.
too. That's
Oh, it
important for
is.
those watching. It's
It's
gorgeous.
so beautiful. So yeah, the first one, and I'll show the back. It's called the Lightkeeper, and so that one opens up, and we have Penny, and Penny is our main character in that one, and this it also relates very much to like how you were saying the spiritual. So the idea of Penny, just the story spark, came because I was visiting Anne up in Pennsylvania, and we passed this river, and there's a lighthouse right by it. And I was like, that's inspiring to me. Like, that's so cool. I want to write a story about like a mermaid who works at a lighthouse, and I'm gonna name her Penny after Pennsylvania because that's where the lighthouse was. Um, So that was where the spark came in. But the story didn't really take off and didn't write itself until I had the theme. And that theme actually was spiritual in a way because it came from a discussion I was having with a friend. And I was really mad and I was really hurt. Not at her, I was venting to her. And I was like, this is so like I was like, Flesh Hannah just really wants to say something just so rude and like I want to get revenge. And I was like, Spirit Hannah is just really having to fight her back. And so that led to a discussion about like the how Paul says like the spirit is willing, or in the Bible it says the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. And then just that uh just the like duality of how like yes, we have these fleshly desires in us and like we want to give in to them because it's our nature, it's our human nature, and it's like, oh, everything in us. And then we have the Holy Spirit, and it's like, you have to hold on, you have to not do this, like you have to act with like gentleness and kindness and faithfulness and self-control. And you're like, I don't want to. So that is really the theme in Penny's story, and you can see that but I exemplify that with saying that it's her siren nature, which is her fleshly, her human side. And she's like, oh, I don't want to do this. They made this mess. Let them, they made their bed. Let them sit in it. And I'm just so frustrated that I have to go out of my way and I have to be uncomfortable for this person. And then we have her father's advice and her human side, and the part that like wants to please him, and she's wants to live up to the aspiration and be the good person that he said that she could be, that she didn't have to listen to like her siren urges. And like in the book, like the siren urges is to like to kill people, to drown the sailors, like that she could fight against that and she could be the better person in that. So that was one way in which the spiritual aspect came into that one. And then we move on to Fins for Freedom. And so this one is, let me see, actually, yeah, oh, sorry, it's the Mermaid Hunt. Okay, the Mermaid Hunt is next. And that one, it started out as a short story based on a prompt. That's where the idea of the story came from. And so I had the idea for like, what if mermaids were freshwater mermaids too? Like, interesting. What if they lived like in a lake or something? And scenery wise, I drew upon my local lake that my grandfather would often take me on. And we'd drive around and I would imagine fins in the water and stuff like that. But the heart of the story, the theme, really focuses on two sisters as they try to grapple with their mom's death. And one sister is convinced that she's death because she, like you were saying, she's very natural, like in the natural versus the supernatural, and like does magic, like what all can exist in the natural realm, and like can miracles happen and stuff like that. So one sister is very scientific facts and like very much natural world. I'm if I can't like touch it or taste it or see it or like it doesn't exist, my mom is dead. Anything else is just like a delusion of a child. And then you have her little sister who's like, no, mom didn't die. She was a mermaid and she had to go back to the water because she had lived too long out of it. And it's like the sister sees it as false hope, but the little girl sees it as hope and the truth and everything. And so that also, it's meant to deal not only with like the grief that we can face, but like, is there hope? Like, is there hope after death? Is there hope in relationships that can be fixed? Like, where is the hope in life? And is there hope in life?
Right. So do you feel like every single one of these or every one of these stories really capture these kinds of like tackle these difficult real human questions? Is that kind of where you wanted to go with each one?
I wouldn't say when pen meets the paper, that is necessarily that was necessarily at the forefront. It's kind of as the stories develop, that was that was where it headed. So with each of them, it depends. For the mermaid hunt, I knew that I wanted to tackle freshwater mermaids, basically. Like, it started with that. But then I was like, how do we wrap something deeper in it? Because as I was talking to one of my writing mentors, I said, and this is nothing against like people who prefer like fluffier, sweet stuff. I love fluffy, sweet stuff occasionally. But I said, for me and myself and what I want to write, I don't want it to be like, I don't want my writing to be like fluffy, sweet nothingness. I want it to always have a meaning, a purpose. I always write with the idea of, I want to make something, I want to create something that will help someone not feel alone. And I don't always like,
Well,
say
it's
it
interesting.
always.
It's interesting because, you know, while cotton candy is very delicious and very fun and very
Yes,
appropriate for many situations, doesn't always hit your gut. And
exactly.
you know, and you can have other candy that does, but there's something about, you know, something with just a little bit more substance that hits you in the gut. And I find that when I tried to write many meaningless, not meaningless, but just like, hey, look, like,
Yeah.
let's not take everything so seriously, Callie,
It's
and let's
fun. Yeah,
it's just
fun.
for fun. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, but my natural inclination, I hope
Mhm.
it's because I care enough about anyone who will read it, is what I hope it is. And then also my own personal desire to make sure that there is substance to it, because I, like we were saying earlier, like, I need substance. I need hope. I
Yes.
can
Yeah.
I cannot I've had to struggle with depression in many dark, deep ways. And if I don't
Mhm.
have hope, I can't do my everyday. And it is a decision for me to choose joy and hope every day. And so it's
Exactly.
my own personal battle. And so when even if I relax and just like, I'm just going to write or listen or sing or whatever creative aspect I'm doing, just blow off steam or something, you know, like something like that, that a lot of people do it for. Um, it always goes back to more meaning. There's always like an underlying,
Mhm.
no, but this is, you were worn out and needing to blow off steam because you were struggling with this particular moral question or
Yeah.
spiritual question or a disturbance in your heart and in your soul.
Yeah.
And maybe you remember that, oh man, I said something that I shouldn't have to somebody, or I operated out of selfishness, or I'm really struggling with, like you were saying earlier, like I'm really struggling with being kind to somebody, or
Mhm.
handling a situation with grace. And I think that is why you and I and so many of all the 20 Hills gals, which is what I love, that we're all together in this group. I think that's a big part of our desire to write stories, is that let it
Yeah.
hit the gut, you know?
Yeah, exactly. We need something to digest. We don't want, like, cotton candy is good, like you said, in certain occasions if we just need lighthearted, but like we want something. What we tend to write is just like the gut punch, so which just kind of
Yeah,
goes back to like 20 Hills like motto, where they're like scream truth into the void type thing.
Yeah,
Like, we want
exactly.
to be the ones that are like, no, wait, here's the meal. We want to feed your souls.
Yeah. And maybe it's also because your book cover is so beautiful that I think of cotton candy every time I look at it. It's like, it's such great colors. Yeah, yeah, it looks great. I'm always like, that book looks delicious. So, you know,
Thank you.
this is so fun to talk to you about this, and some of your, you know, it's interesting that you've chosen water as such a
Mhm.
big setting for so many of your stories. Is there a specific reason why? What is it about water that draws to you?
Yeah. Um, so I think, again, twofold answers. The first one's going to be our really light and fluffy one. I fell in love with just water and mermaids and everything like that. just because I grew up around water. Like, we have a local lake. I have a pool. I don't remember learning to swim. I just remember swimming every every summer since forever. And so I just would always like play pretend in the water, and I would just feel so like relaxed there, and my imagination could run free when I was like looking at it or being near it. And then actually, I guess that was the not so fluffy one. That was also kind of the deeper one. The fluffy one is that I think my obsession did kind of start with like watching movies about mermaids, like The Little Mermaid. I was obsessed.
Yeah, obsessed. Yeah. Well, you know what? This segues well into, I wanted to do a little bit of rating of mermaid films.
Ooh,
If
okay.
you wanted to, this will be a little rapid fire section, and then we'll get back into the deep stuff. But I think this might be fun. I've got a list. It's probably not complete, and just say if you haven't seen one of these. I haven't seen all of them, but I have seen quite a few. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to list some of the titles, and then we'll go through and rank so that you can kind of give yourself a minute to decide, which one you want to do.
All right.
Okay, so we have the original Little Mermaid from Disney in 1989. We also have the new live action one from 2023.
Ooh.
Okay. And then we have Splash. I don't know if you ever saw that one, a romantic comedy. And then we have Aquamarine, which is very silly.
Okay.
But did you ever see that one, the Teen Mermaids befriend?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then now this one I have not seen, but it sounds amazing. It's called The Lure. It's from 2015, and it's a Polish horror musical featuring two mermaid sisters who perform in a nightclub.
Okay, I will be upfront. I have never seen or even heard of The Lure.
I haven't either. I was just like, what is this? And then now I have actually seen this one. It's called The Mermaid, and it's a Chinese romantic fantasy where a mermaid is sent to assassinate a businessman, but they fall in love. So interesting there.
Okay, I've heard of that one. I have not seen it, but I've heard of that one.
All right. And then Mermaids, which is the Winona Ryder and Cher movie. That's like a coming of age story. It doesn't actually have literal mermaids, but Google does what Google does here.
Exactly.
Mermaid Lake of the Dead, which is a Russian horror film inspired by the Slavic mythology, where a mermaid spirit haunts a lake. And then we'll get back to the stuff we all know, which is The 13th Year. Nobody. That one, right? Yeah. And then H2O, the Australian TV series. So we've got a couple that we can't really rate because we haven't seen The Lure, and we haven't seen, what was the Russian one? Lake of the Dead. So
no, never seen it.
So we can't really rate those, but they're on the list now for maybe next time. Okay. So out of like the Little Mermaids, live action Disney animation, then Splash, and then 13th Year and H2O, how would you rate those from 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, like just awful, and 5 being your favorite iteration of mermaids?
Oh, okay. I first out of the gate, I'm going to have to put H2O 5. My favorite.
Partner. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going
Yeah.
I cannot express how many times I have watched H2O start to finish. Also, I'll drop a little secret Easter egg. Fins for Freedom has a bunch of H2O references, tiny little Easter eggs. It takes place in Australia for one thing, and then if you know some actresses' names that might star in H2O, you might find them cropping up there. Brilliant. I love it. One of my childhood nicknames was actually Emma because of H2O. So I was like, it's beautiful. For Little Mermaid, we're going to go 1989 version. I'm going to put that at a solid 4.5.
Yep.
And I have reasons. As a child, I would have been horrified to not give it a solid 5. As an adult, I'm like, girl, you are 16. Get your butt back in the water.
Right.
And then as a child, I also really liked Prince Eric. And then as an adult, I'm like, he doesn't have much personality. It was funny because Anne and I were actually having this discussion yesterday, and we were talking about how like it really does exemplify like a 16-year-old's crush. Like she has this dream and she wants to like get out of the water. She thinks that she's so in love with Eric and everything, but like she doesn't know him that much. She fell in love with him because she rescued him basically.
It's a superficial kind of interest, really.
Exactly. And so I would have loved to see the romance develop more, or like really see her, because I do also think that they do really balance that well with like how much she desires to be human. Like first and foremost, her love of humanity is like on display and everything. And I do like that. I think the romance, because it does become so important, I think it could have been handled better. Which is when we go to the Little Mermaid live action, which I would put at a solid, trying to think of where that would rank. I would put that at a 3.8. 3.8. I have a couple reasons for this. It scores high in that I love how they developed Eric and Ariel's relationship. Like I love the changes in that regard. I love the Jodie Benson cameo. I love like Callie and how she sings and her voice. Like, just beautiful. Hearing her sing part of your world just like brings me to tears.
Yeah.
We're docking points because I hate the CGI. I absolutely
I know. And the sisters look terrible.
So bad. Flounder and Sebastian look like they could haunt my nightmares. I'm taking off all the points for that. And also, I do like all the new songs except for Scuttlebutt. To jail. Scuttlebutt goes to jail.
Straight to jail.
Yes. You might not believe it. Straight to jail. So those are the factors that lower it down, and they unfortunately do lower it down a whole lot because the over reliance on CGI just made me not enjoy it as much as I could have, because
you're distracted. You're distracted. And it doesn't actually capture the best part about imagination and film being so well integrated is that it isn't realistic, is that it isn't based off of reality, and it always fits, like, arguably there's funny imagination that you could attribute to like kind of the Minecraft idea of like square sheep or something, and you have really weird dreams where you're like that's not anything. But then when you actually get a moment to think about it, and if you're sketching or if you're writing, there's a beauty and a fluidity and a surrealism about putting something together in the imagination. And what they did to Flounder and Sebastian and even the sisters, they were kind of sort of based off other real fish or something, and they did it very poorly. And then the fake water and the fake swimming around and everything. I mean, come on. The mermaid culture is huge as far as performers that perform at Ren fairs and everything else, and those women and men are incredibly talented at swimming with those fins. And I mean, it made me believe that, like, okay, I guess somebody could do that, because it's amazing. And to not use a plethora of, like, to not use that in your casting, I was like, I mean, we could go on and on about how stupid Disney is right now. We won't, because we also have like plenty of dwarves and small people that would have loved to have been in Snow White, like, okay, whatever. But 3.8. All right.
Yes. Next. Yeah. And let me see. Also, just piggybacking one more thought off of that. It's like when they use the imagination just enough that it's like, well, why did you make this choice? Because we have singing and dancing animals. And then it's like, but we're going hyper realistic. This is like, come on.
I know.
It's a musical and you have a singing fish.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Okay, aquamarine.
Oh yeah.
I am going to put that at a solid. This is hard because I can already see my nostalgia trying to tempt this. And I have
Oh yeah,
more
yeah.
nostalgia, even though it's like a newer movie, I have more nostalgia for kind of the live action Little Mermaid
Hmm.
uh, than I do Aquamarine. But that's because the nostalgia for the live action Little Mermaid is bleeding over from
Yeah, from
the,
the original.
the cartoon. Um, but if I take them as what they are in the overall story, and I have to put Aquamarine at 4.
At 4.
And yeah, I don't
Nice. Okay. Very high.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple reasons uh that I'm saying this. Um for one thing, as much as I love the romance between Ariel and Eric in a live action, um I adore the friendship between the two girls.
Mm,
Like Emma and Jojo. I
mm,
can't remember their characters' names right off the tip of my tongue, but I know their actresses' names.
yeah.
I love their friendship because that is something I don't think gets talked about enough in like literature a whole lot, is like super deep friendships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I yeah,
We've
I was
lost.
gonna.
We've lost that. We've lost like
Mhm.
romance, and we've lost sisterhood in a major way. And
Yeah.
I think you and I know the core reasons of that is because of ideologies that take over that and taint those relationships into
Yeah.
something that they're not. And it is sad. It is very sad that in literature and film, like a solid friendship, like I love, I absolutely love stories with two guys that are like bros. Like they are, fighting together, and they are like man to man. And that's like, like Sherlock and Watson, like,
Yes.
Robin Hood and Will Scarlet, or Little John. Like I could go on and on and on and on and on. And
Mhm.
I miss that. I
I
miss
do
that
too.
so much. Now, something that I think has been underrepresented, dare I use that word, is a lot of sisterhood. Is a lot of
Yes,
sisterhood. And
agreed.
I think that that's very special, that there are a few films out there that highlight that.
Yes, I completely agree. And that is one thing that I think H2O both does really well and also in places really badly. And I can elaborate on that too. Um, but as for Aquamarine specifically, I find it tragic that in a lot of like in a lot of stories, the sisterhood always falls apart where there's a guy involved. Like it just feels like a lot of writers always think that like girls can't be friends once a guy is involved. Like either you get out of like you get into a relationship and then your other friendships just fall away. Like an example
Yeah.
of that would be like Rory and Lane and Gilmore Girls. Like once Rory starts dating, we don't see her interact with Lane that much. Like it suddenly becomes secondary, which I think is a
Mhm.
travesty. And then the flip side of that is that we always see girls fighting for a guy, it feels like. But what I love about Aquamarine, that it's just so subtle and it's powerful because they don't ever say, hey, this is our message. It's just the story. They just
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
They both have a crush on the same guy
Yeah.
and it doesn't come between them. But not only that, they immediately, once Sarah Paxton's Aquamarine comes
Yeah.
in and she's like, I love him. They're like, okay, we'll get you, like we'll start like trying to hook you up with him.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're gonna give you hints, and like none of it's gonna come from jealousy, and like
Yeah.
we're just all gonna support each other. And yeah, I
Yeah.
I love how deep the sisterhood bond is, and it's powerful because it's never thrust in your face. It's
Mhm.
just like it just goes without saying. Like, of course we're not gonna let a guy get between us. Of course we're gonna like this is our mermaid friend and like she's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
help us stay together and we're going to like willingly give up our chance for this guy that we think is dreamy to like
Yeah.
try and stay together and like
Play
bring
together.
this new girl into the fold.
Yeah.
Um
And yeah, exactly. I think that's very it's very true. And now that you're mentioning all those things, I'm like, oh yeah, because I used to watch that movie, when I was younger, and I was like, it was kind of dumb, but I always liked it. And
It is a little.
it's a little cheesy. It's a little cheesy, but that's
100%.
okay. I think, and I didn't include these in that list of rating because I know that they're a segment of their own. But we have Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. And then I don't know if you've seen the really strange, but actually could have been amazing, The King's Daughter indie film. You've
I
probably seen it pop up on your, Netflix or something. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting little mermaid tale in it. And so that's a funny one. And then another one, oh, what was the other one I was thinking that I didn't have on that list? Because mermaids aren't the main part of the story, but it does get into their lore. Well, there's also
Mhm.
like Peter Pan, the mermaids are a big part of it. And
Yeah.
isn't it interesting that, mermaids specifically are very attractive to women, to girls, this kind of
Mhm.
idea of the beauty, the wildness. They're often associated with that kind of beautiful, dangerous, dare I say, chaos energy that can be, um, that a woman walks through, especially throughout her, growing up as a teen. There's that kind of beautiful, dangerous, like she's frazzled and, she's a little fragile, but she's growing into her womanhood. And so I think that that's interesting. And then they're also always luring people, whether for good or bad. We talk about H2O, we talk about aquamarine, and, there's they're always trying to like lure people, and people are always very attracted to who they are, and they're always trying to be very secret about it. um, what are your thoughts on the depictions of mermaids and some of their lore, and which side are you partial to? Are you partial to the kind of H2O vibe, or are you partial to the Pirates of the Caribbean, Stranger Tides, you know, wants to drag you down? I mean, you cover both in your book, which is why people need to pick up this book. But what do you think? Which one are you more partial to?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, Knee jerk answer, both depending on my mood. I think I think it's interesting though to like look at what mermaids like mean, and like how you were saying like why women in particular are so drawn to them. And I think it's because of the what they represent. Like, they're mysterious in ways. In a lot of ways, they're more innocent, more cutesy, but they're free. They don't have to answer to like rules or regulations per se. Like they are unknown, they're wild. That freedom, I think, really appeals to women. I think it also shows kind of the other side, and maybe more of what we also feel that we need to be to protect ourselves, like that's the free part of ourselves. But then the darker depictions of mermaids are kind of appeal to what we think that we have to be to protect ourselves, like to protect that innerness. It's like, well, I have to be fierce, I have to kind of know how to work men. I also have to have this power and be able to use it in everything to protect myself and what's important to me. And I think it can also kind of prey on like the fears of of society as well. Um, Kind of how like there's nothing as dangerous as like a well-read woman type
Mm-hmm.
thing. How
Yeah,
people tend to fear super powerful women at times. But yeah, I think there's a lot to say about us and what we like about mermaids and how we feel about mermaids, um, and how we view them and how we see them and stuff. So I think that
exactly.
yeah, that's a really deep discussion that
It
I
is. Yeah,
really
yeah.
trench that we could fall
we
into.
could, yeah, and we don't have that much time, unfortunately. But I think that is something. I think there's more, and I'm sure that I know that there are men and people who like mermaids and stuff, and I'm not necessarily ruling them out. But because you and I are women and we're sitting here and we're talking together, let's just keep it simple. I think that there is definitely a conversation to be had about the ideology and the representation of womanhood within the mermaid world. And I agree. I mean, maybe we should have a discussion about that another time. Listeners, watchers, if you want that discussion between Hannah and I, put it in the comments, because I think that would be kind of a cool little side study. Because some things that I did want to bring up briefly that we can touch on, because you have so much depth to your book and your own writing, is, we know that there's a lot of mythology around how if mermaids exist, right? And if they did, and what kind of context. And, many of us, myself included, argue that, like, hey, when there's a reoccurring story throughout every culture, completely separated by miles and oceans, that all have a similar thing, like dragons, like the flood, like mermaids, there's got to be some sprinkle of truth in there. Does it mean that it is exactly a mermaid, or, exactly a dragon? I mean, I think yes, but for the sake of discussion, maybe it's not quite. But I think that it's interesting that throughout Greek, Assyrian, of course, Irish, Scottish, Cornish, Slovakian, Russian, Asian. I mean, you go down the list of every culture, South American, they all have mermaid stories. And I thought it might be interesting to point out some like reported sightings of mermaids that nobody was able to really debunk. And one of the earliest ones we have recorded that's outside of folklore is Christopher Columbus reported that he saw mermaids in 1493 outside the Dominican Republic area. And, the History Channel and National Geographic and Discovery Channel said, oh, those have got to be manatees. What do you think?
Oh, that's a
Are
great
mermaids real?
Are mermaids real? So I am going to give a politician's answer on this.
No, you're not. You are not allowed. No.
All right.
No. I am a voting American, and I say no.
All right. I'll give a long-winded answer, and we'll get there.
Okay.
So I think that there are people who, like P.T. Barnum, who clearly are grifters and are preying upon these things. And those are not real. There can be fakes. Like there can be fakes of anything. I also think that, like you were saying, like, were dragons real? Were they something different? Like, are mermaids real? Are they something different? I would fall into that camp, because I think language in itself is faulty at times. So just because, like, we see this depiction and we're like, oh yeah, that's what we call a mermaid, but that doesn't mean like that there might not be something else that, like, okay, this is what we think we see, but this is the actual, like, what actually we are seeing. Like, we are calling this a mermaid. What might it be? We don't know. Maybe, I don't think it's a manatee. I've seen manatees. I think Christopher Columbus needed some glasses if you thought that. So I think that, like, whatever it is, there is something, like a kernel of truth. Whether it still exists, I can't say. Maybe it's extinct. Maybe, yeah. But I also know that the ocean is very much unexplored. And I would not rule out anything. And I operate under the same, like, the last thing that I'll say to this is, like, I operate under this belief. I have seen online that people will say, oh, if this exists, then all of Christianity is debunked. And you could not possibly believe in God if, like, XYZ exists. I'm like, okay, I don't follow your logic, because one thing, if this exists, God's its creator. And
Yeah.
I don't understand why this has to somehow be a faith crisis. God doesn't tell us exactly, like he doesn't even tell us exactly what animals that he created in
Yeah.
Genesis. Like we aren't given, here is the complete list of every single creature,
Yeah.
animal, human that ever existed, all the information you got to know.
Yep.
God didn't write that. He's just like, I created stuff.
I did this. Yeah. Yeah.
Discover it.
Yeah, exactly. It does leave so much up to discovery, and it's fascinating that throughout history, I mean, 1812 all the way up to 2005, 2012, 2009, 1997, there's been very significant and many, many more sightings of mermaids or half human like creatures. And exactly, it doesn't shake my faith at all. In fact, it validates mine because
Exactly.
whether it's true or not, it says, well, you know what? Then maybe me believing that God created the world from nothing isn't actually that wild because there could be mermaids out there. And that seems to shake everybody more than many other things. But I also I've always been such a huge fan of fairy tales because I always believe there's buried truth in them.
Yeah.
Mostly it's a moral truth. Mostly it's like you're doing. It's telling a story with a deeper meaning that you can digest and you can ponder. On top of that, you're using metaphor, you're using allegory, using imagination to paint those. But at the same time, there's still a lake and a lighthouse and a ship. There's a lot of true things and real things that you have put in your stories that actually do exist. And it's kind of like putting little clues together. And so I think that there are significant truths to be found in various folklore and legend. And just to kind of briefly summarize that, like one of my favorite lores that I've come across with mermaids, I read it a long time ago in a story, and I recently found it again online, but it's not what I read in a book. It's really frustrating about the internet right now. Is I mean, like the search is stupid, and ChatGPT sucks when it comes to finding actual sources for anything.
Yeah.
But one of my favorites was, and I think it dates back to the Nuremberg Bible, but it also dates back to just kind of embedded older folklores and Czechoslovakian folklore. Mermaids are the people who didn't make it on the ark, and they are people without their souls. They're lost souls that were, because of their evil and because of their not making it on the ark, not accepting God, they became a twisted thing. And so they are the lost souls from the ark. And, or not from the ark, but didn't make it on the ark. And I think that that's an interesting concept for many, many reasons. One of them being that in the absence of God, of hope, of true love, and love is another one of those words that we could talk about. Language, but the encompassing various forms of love, without that, its absence twists and manipulates something that is, while could be perceived as beautiful, is incomplete. It's half and half. It's missing components of itself that it wishes it had. And while it's free and while it's fascinating and while it calls to a part of us that's also in it, it's not complete. And that is the absence of Christ in our lives. There's things that we attract that, like, good vibes this, or oh, I know it's good not to yell at somebody out of anger. And there's things we identify with, but we're not complete. And we're just a twisted half and half creature. And when we come to know the Lord, we either become the full fish, which almost never happens if a mermaid kind of, becomes powerful or part of its thing. Usually it becomes human, and it's only the tragic part that takes it back to the ocean, whether it's the many tales and Irish folklore especially, and in Cornish where, a woman washes up on shore and everyone tries to incorporate her and she goes to church, but then she ends up luring a man to his death and goes back to the ocean and kills him, and goes back to that mermaid self. Or raises a family and, is the strange, beautiful woman that's very mysterious in the village, and everyone whispers about her being a mermaid, and, and this. And I think that it goes right back to your very first story in Saltwater Souls, is that there is that flesh desire and there is that spirit desire.
Mm-hmm.
And when you and I are talking about flesh and spirit, just for our listeners who may not know, and you don't have to agree, listener, but when we talk about these things, we're talking about it as in, we know we have a fleshly body. We also know we have a soul and a spirit. And we believe, Hannah and I, that we were created with a purpose and a design, which is why we tell stories. And then we also believe that there is a war within us, the war to react rashly, the war to hurt others, to hurt ourselves. And then we believe that there is Christ, who is that hope, who not only comes in and befriends us and draws us into this relationship, but loves us and instructs us through action, through his stories, how we can change and love ourselves, treat ourselves with kindness and respect, and treat others with kindness and respect. But those two things war, right? Which is what you're talking about with painting. And, the desire to just get that dadgum captain and just and then that wildness of the sea versus what her father taught her. You and I believe that our Father, our Heavenly Father, is the one who's instructing us to treat others good. Doesn't mean you can't do it without him. It just means you won't be complete. You will be half human and half fish, to pull our metaphor together here. And that is what we're talking about when we're talking about this battle of like spirit and flesh. And if we take it as far as Hannah has in her story, this first one, which the other ones go deeper into other things, we see that the siren song, the ocean, the wildness, the unknown, the angst is what is attracting us to do one thing, while the kindness and the light and the purpose is attracting us to do another. And that is, it's a huge war. It's obviously one humanity has been struggling with time out of mind. Mm-hmm. Because whether folklore and fairy tales are real or not, they are a depiction, a sign, a revelation, a working through, a dissertation on the struggle of mankind that hits women and men of, will I do the good thing or will I do the bad thing? Will I live on land or will I live in the sea? Will I try to live in both and thusly be very miserable? Which is, the potential that many people have to tell their stories. Will I try to tell a story of hope, give somebody something that hits their gut? Or will I just be like ambiguous and be like, well, does a mermaid exist? Does it not? Should you do the good thing or should you not? And that doesn't help anybody. In fact, you just have a lot of confusion. And so with this broad scope of things we just went through in this conversation, I do that. Sorry. What, in light of that, in light of the struggle you've talked about that yourself has gone through, that your characters go through, that fairy tale creatures go through, and that we all go through, what is the one thing that keeps you going?
Oh, okay. That is a great question. And I think I'm going to give a twofold answer, because I understand that not everyone has the same faith as me, but I also believe that everyone needs to keep on going. Like, I think that everyone needs hope. And though to me, that hope in itself will always derive from like God. Mm-hmm. I recognize that, like, for some viewers, some listeners, that doesn't resonate with them. Like, that's not what they believe. And so instead of saying, well, I think that you should believe like me, I'm going to meet them where they are. And I'm also going to let them know what I think. So for myself, what keeps me going is that I believe I have a calling given to me by God. And I believe that He has given me this gift. And I don't think that He wants me to squander it. And I can go back to like the story, the parable of the talents, which in the Bible, talent does not mean a talent like writing or speaking. It's a money thing. But the stewardship is the same. And I like that it uses the word talent, because I think in our world, that is what God, like, that is one of the things that God gives us a lot. Like, He wants you to be a good steward of your talent. He wants you to use it. He doesn't want you to hide it away. And so that is one thing that keeps me going. It's just like this call. And I've had a few people ask me, well, why do you create? I'm like, I can't do anything else. Like, I just see this and it's just a call to create, basically. Like, I don't know what it's like to like not look at a candle or a lake and like just see endless opportunities and endless stories. The other thing that keeps me going, and this would be for, let's leave religion behind for a second, because like I said, it's important for everyone to keep on going. It is my stubbornness. And so what I mean by that is just, it can be hard. It can be discouraging, like not just professionally, but sometimes in life, especially if you deal with depression. It's like, what's the point of keeping going? Like, why do I do it? And it's because, to me, when I look at the stories that are the most inspiring, and it's my stubbornness that I want to be inspiring, that I want to help people, that I want, when I come to the end of my life, I want to look back and I want to not have regrets. And I want to be like, yes, those people are the people who inspired others, who kept going when it was hard, who overcame adversity, who didn't give in. And I'm going to go back to a quote by Walt Disney. And it's at the end of one of my favorite movies, Meet the Robinsons, an underrated film. No mermaids in that one, sadly.
Right, yeah.
But at the very end, it's just a very touching scene where it says, we keep moving forward. Like, we dreamers, we keep moving forward. Like, we who see the future, like, keep moving forward. And to me, that is one of the most inspiring things. Like, when you think about what you want to leave behind, what message you want to leave behind, it doesn't matter what you come from. If you come from an abusive home, addiction, trauma, abuse, like, it does not matter what you come from. What story do you want to leave behind for yourself? Do you want to be the person that gave up and said, it's too hard, I'm going to be another victim? Or do you want to be the person that says, I was a victor, I kept moving forward. Didn't matter if sometimes I didn't know what the heck it was for. My end goal was to keep moving forward because I wanted to inspire myself and others. And I think that is what inspires me.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. That is so important. I love that you gave the twofold answer. That's great. Well, I know obviously we could keep going and we could keep talking about so many things, but Hannah, I really appreciate you coming on Never Drop Your Sword. I think it is courageous what you do, because you're dealing with your life and your things and you're writing stories and you're publishing, and all of that comes from, that desire to move forward, that desire to create, and it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing your heart with people today and for having this very fun, wild, random little loop-de-loop conversation
everywhere. Yeah.
We did. And I think that's very fun. And so thank you so much. Everybody, I'm going to have links to Hannah's website and her socials and her book, Saltwater Souls, in the description below. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, that's in the show notes. Just open that little accordion section down there and you will see. Follow her. She's got more stuff coming out. She's prolific, like I mentioned at the beginning. She's award winning. She obviously has incredibly deep thoughts and a funny taste in film, since we rated Aquamarine so high. And and I hope to have you back, and I just really appreciate you coming on. Of course, everybody, like, share, subscribe. Please leave in the comments if you want us to have a theological, female-led discussion on mermaids and should women be them or not. And then from there, we'll just keep going. And thank you so much, Hannah. I've got one last question and ask you a brief answer.
All right.
Here we go. What's the one thing in your profession that we're not talking about, but we really should be?
Oh, great question. I think we're not talking about mental illness well. And I could go into a huge discussion about that, but I'll just leave it at, how I said, like, in Aquamarine, the female friendship was powerful because it wasn't just like in your face. I think we're not doing that with mental illness. It feels like it is always a person's entire personality, or like it's always the main focus, or it's just a box tick. Like, oh yeah, we got the depressed person, we got the anxious person, the OCD, whatever. There's a lot of things that they're doing with that, and so I think that we are not having deep discussions, especially concerning mental illness.
Excellent. All right, thank you so much, and stay courageous.